how did Rome build roads that still exist today? The methods used to build these roads will shock you. Thousands of years ago, when most of Europe was covered in impenetrable forests and swamps, one civilization created a network that changed the world. They had no excavators, no asphalt pavers, no laser levels. Their strength lay elsewhere, in strict order, ingenious engineering, and the understanding that power is speed. The Romans did not just build roads, they built arteries for their empire, through which legions, goods, and decrees flowed like blood. Many of these stone roads are so perfect that they are still in use today, 2,000 years later. Modern highways crumble after decades, but these have stood for centuries. Watch the video to the end to find out how the Romans managed to build perfectly straight roads through mountains and swamps, what secret ingredient made their concrete stronger than modern concrete, and why roads were the main reason for both the rise and fall of the greatest empire in history. What if I told you that the famous Roman roads were not built so that you or ordinary citizens could travel comfortably between cities or visit relatives? Their true primary purpose was much more severe, practical, and pragmatic than simply providing convenience to the population. It was first and foremost a large-scale strategic military project of colossal proportions, born out of an urgent need to control conquered territories and respond quickly to threats. Roads were an instrument of Rome's military machine, without which the empire could not have existed and controlled its possessions. The Roman Empire expanded at a truly incredible rate over the centuries, conquering new lands, and in order to effectively maintain iron control over vast, scattered territories from Britain to Egypt, one critically important quality was required: the highest mobility of the armed forces. Numerous legions had to move from one remote province to another with maximum speed and predictability in order to quickly suppress dangerous uprisings of conquered peoples and effectively repel devastating raids by wild barbarians on the borders. In this context, a well-built straight road was as important a strategic weapon for the Roman army as a sharp gladius sword or a heavy pilum spear for a legionnaire. Without a developed road network, the empire would have been defenseless against external and internal threats. That is why the main and indisputable principle of Roman road construction was the absolute straightness of the road, regardless of obstacles. They did not meander or bend, obediently skirting natural elevations and hills, but resolutely cut straight through them, laying tunnels or building high embankments, stubbornly saving every precious hour of the army's journey to its destination. Time was the most valuable and irreplaceable resource of the vast empire that ruled millions of people, and carefully planned roads were an effective engineering means of subjugating it to the will of Rome. Every mile saved could mean the difference between victory and defeat in a distant province where a rebellion had broken out. In addition to heavily armed legions, fast couriers from the Imperial State Postal Service, known as the cursus publicus, raced along these strategic routes day and night, changing horses at special stations. Important news about uprisings, urgent orders from the emperor, and detailed reports from governors in Rome itself reached the farthest corners of the vast empire at a speed unheard of in ancient times, often in a matter of days. It was a veritable nervous system of information, tightly binding together the giant state organism of the empire and allowing the central authority to effectively govern distant provinces. Without rapid communication, the empire would have broken up into independent parts. Developed trade between provinces and mass civilian travel across the empire were only a secondary, positive side effect of the existence of military roads, but not their purpose. Of course, well-built roads contributed significantly to the impressive economic growth and prosperity of the provinces by connecting markets. But this was not their main original purpose when planning their construction. The main and only purpose of the road network was to effectively project Rome's military and political power to absolutely any point on the map of the vast empire in the shortest possible time. Economic benefits were a pleasant bonus, but not the main task that military engineers were solving. Each straight road was a physical, visible embodiment of the unshakable Roman order and civilization. forcibly imposed on the wild, chaotic landscape of barbarian lands. Straight as an arrow, it clearly demonstrated to all conquered peoples and travelers who was the real master and ruler here. It spoke eloquently without words. Rome has passed through here with its legions, and now this is forever our land, part of the empire. The road was a symbol of conquest and the establishment of a new order, a physical scar of Roman civilization on the body of wild nature. That is why the laborious construction of roads was the direct responsibility of the Roman army, not civilian contractors. Experienced legionnaires in the relatively peaceful times between military campaigns naturally transformed themselves from professional soldiers into skilled engineers and skilled builders, applying their discipline. Each ordinary soldier personally contributed his heavy physical labor to the gradual strengthening of the power and stability of the state by building another section of road. The army was not only a destructive force, but also a creative force of the empire, creating infrastructure for future generations. The Romans did not build roads for the immediate convenience of their contemporaries, but purposefully for eternity and centuries of future use. Each carefully constructed road was originally designed by engineers to withstand the heavy footsteps of countless legions on the march for many centuries, and to serve many generations of Romans faithfully without major repairs. Do you think the main goals of modern road construction have changed fundamentally compared to Roman times? Or do military necessity and the state component still come first in terms of priorities, only cleverly hidden behind beautiful talk about the convenience of ordinary citizens and economic development? Share your informed opinion in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about who actually built these eternal arteries of the empire? Contrary to popular belief, the main work was not done by slaves. The main construction force was the Roman legionaries themselves. For the Roman army, construction was as important a task as waging war. In peacetime, when the legions were not fighting, their enormous disciplined force was directed toward creating infrastructure. This solved two problems at once. It kept the soldiers in shape and benefited the state. Each legion was a self-sufficient unit with its own specialists. Engineers, architects, surveyors, all of them were professional soldiers. Centurions supervised the work, ensuring iron discipline and strict adherence to the plan. The construction process was strictly regulated and standardized. Regardless of where the road was being built, in Britain, Africa, or Syria, the same technologies and quality standards were used. This ensured the uniformity and reliability of the entire road network. Roman engineers, or grammatici, were true masters of their craft. They were responsible for marking out the future route. It was their precision that determined whether the road would be straight and whether it would have the correct slope for water drainage. Their tools were simple but effective. They allowed them to lay perfectly straight lines for many kilometers and calculate gradients with remarkable accuracy. Mistakes were unacceptable because any unevenness or bend meant a loss of precious time on the road. The work was incredibly hard. Legionnaires cut down forests by hand, drained swamps, and cut paths through rocks. They extracted, transported, and laid thousands of tons of stone and gravel. This system transformed the army from a mere consumer of resources into a creative force. The legions did not just defend the empire, they built it. This was one of the key reasons for the stability of the Roman state. Discipline and organization allowed them to complete projects of colossal scale in a short time. Road construction was like a military operation. Precise planning, distribution of tasks, and strict execution. But how did these engineers, without lasers or satellites, lay perfectly straight lines for tens of kilometers through hills and forests? In the next chapter, we will reveal the secrets of their amazing tools, which seem like magic even today. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of Roman engineers, which allowed them to perform miracles of precision. Their main tool for laying straight lines was the groma. This simple device consisted of a vertical pole with a horizontal crossbar at the top. Plumb lines hung from the ends of the crossbar. By looking along the two plumb lines in a straight line, the surveyor could set a perfectly straight vector. Moving the grom along this vector, he marked out the future road. This tool was incredibly effective on flat terrain. It allowed dozens of kilometers of road to be laid out without the slightest deviation. It is thanks to the Grom that Roman roads look as if they were drawn with a ruler. But what about hills and uneven terrain that obstructed the direct view? Here, smoke signals and bonfires came into play. Scouts climbed to high ground and lit fires, creating a chain of visible landmarks along which the route was laid. To determine the correct slope of the road, the Romans used a horobatus. It was a long, about 6-meter-long wooden beam on legs with a groove cut into it. Water was poured into this groove, turning the device into a giant water level. With the help of the horobatus, engineers achieved a perfect, barely noticeable slope of the road surface. This was critically important for drainage. Water did not stagnate on the road but flowed down the sides into drainage ditches. Another complex tool was the diopter. It was a device for measuring angles, both horizontally and vertically. It was an ancient analog of a theodolite, which allowed complex engineering tasks to be solved. For example, in the construction of aqueducts and tunnels. When building a tunnel through a mountain, two groups of builders would start working from different sides. Thanks to precise calculations using the diopter, they would meet in the middle of the mountain with minimal error. This required the highest level of skill. These instruments, made of wood, bronze, and lead, were the pinnacle of ancient engineering. They were simple, reliable, and incredibly accurate in skilled hands. They made it possible to implement ambitious projects that still amaze the imagination today. The secret of the Romans was not magic, but geometry and strict adherence to calculations. They turned science into a practical tool for building an empire. Their roads are a monument not only to the labor, but also to the sharp minds of their creators. What I am about to show you is the basis of every Roman road, and it is more ingenious than it seems at first glance. The secret of the durability of Roman roads lay deep underground. It was a complex, multi-layered structure, reminiscent of a modern pie. It all started with digging a trench or fossa. It could be up to 1.5 meters deep. This was done so that the roadbed would be below the frost line, protecting it from damage in winter. The first layer, statumen, meaning support, was laid at the bottom of the trench. It consisted of large, roughly cut stones, about the size of a fist or larger. This layer served as a solid foundation and provided drainage. On top of it, a second layer, rudus, was poured. It consisted of smaller stones, broken bricks or gravel mixed with lime. This layer was carefully compacted to create a dense and waterproof base. The third layer was called the nucleus, or core. It was a kind of Roman concrete consisting of fine gravel, sand, and hot lime. It was laid hot and also carefully tamped down, creating a perfectly flat and solid cushion for the final covering. And finally, the top layer, the summum dorsum, or pavimentum. It consisted of large stone slabs that were tightly fitted together. These slabs had a smooth surface and were laid with a slight slope from the center to the edges. This convex shape, or hump, was a key element of the ingenious drainage system. Rainwater did not linger on the surface but immediately drained into drainage ditches, which were always laid on both sides of the road. It was this complex structure and attention to drainage that made Roman roads virtually eternal. They were built to withstand the main enemy of any construction, water. Each layer performed its own important function. This technology was incredibly labor-intensive and expensive, but the Romans understood that they were building for centuries. They did not skimp on quality because the stability of the entire empire depended on it. But even the perfect recipe is useless without high-quality ingredients. Where did the Romans get millions of tons of stone, and how did they create their legendary concrete, which still amazes engineers today? We will discuss this in the next chapter. Road construction required a huge amount of materials. The main one was, of course, stone. Roman engineers organized quarries along the entire length of the future road. Legionnaires and hired workers quarried stone using simple tools, wedges, hammers, and levers. They split huge boulders and shaped them as needed. This titanic labor was the foundation of every kilometer of road. Logistics was no less challenging. The stone had to be delivered to the construction site. Ox-drawn carts were used for this purpose, and where possible, the material was transported by river on barges. A key component of many structures was Roman concrete, or opus cementicum. It was much stronger and more durable than simple lime mortar. The secret lay in one unique ingredient. This ingredient was pozzolan, a fine volcanic ash that was mined in the Naples area. When mixed with lime and water, it reacted chemically to form an incredibly strong and water-resistant compound. Roman concrete could even set underwater, allowing bridges and port structures of unprecedented strength to be built. This material was a real technological revolution. In road construction, concrete was used in the nucleus layer. It created a monolithic, rock-hard foundation. It was this foundation that gave the road the strength to withstand heavy traffic for centuries. Lime for concrete and mortar was obtained by burning limestone in special kilns. These kilns were built near the construction site to ensure an uninterrupted supply of fresh material. The production of materials was organized on a truly imperial scale. It was an entire industry that provided work for thousands of people. Each road was not just a construction project, but also a huge logistical and manufacturing project. The combination of high-quality stone, carefully thought-out laying, and unique concrete became the formula for eternity. The Romans did not just build, they created new materials and technologies that were thousands of years ahead of their time. What if everything you were taught about construction and engineering in modern educational institutions is hopelessly outdated by a whole 2,000 years and inferior to ancient methods? Roman engineers and builders fundamentally did not give up or retreat in the face of the serious difficulties of complex terrain, as other peoples did. If a high mountain or rocky ridge suddenly appeared on the planned route of a straight road, they did not look for easy ways around it or take a long detour, but resolutely cut a straight passage through the hard rock, regardless of the cost. The Romans subjugated nature to their will rather than submitting to its whims, demonstrating the superiority of human reason over the elements. These large-scale passages, or deep excavations in rock, required truly enormous physical effort and time from the workers. Enduring legionnaires methodically dug into the hard rock with picks and shovels for weeks and long months of hard labor, removing layer after layer, ton after ton. Sometimes, to speed up the work, they used a cunning method of fire drilling known since ancient times. A massive rock was heated to the maximum temperature with intense fires for a long time, and then suddenly cooled with a large amount of cold water, causing it to crack and split from the temperature shock. This method significantly accelerated the cutting of passages in the hardest rocks, which could not be broken by hand with simple tools. If there was a deep depression, ravine, or dangerous swampy terrain with unstable soil on the planned route, the practical Romans did not change the route, but built a high, massive embankment known as an agger, sometimes reaching 10 meters in height. This artificial embankment of earth and stones raised the road surface well above the level of groundwater and floods, keeping it dry and sturdy in all seasons. Sometimes, for additional stability, numerous logs were laid at the base of such a huge embankment, creating a kind of floating distributed foundation on unstable ground that prevented the embankment from sinking. This technology made it possible to build roads even in the most unfavorable conditions of swampy marshes. Full-flowing rivers were also not an insurmountable obstacle for Roman engineers in their ambitions. The Romans were rightly considered the greatest and unsurpassed bridge builders in the ancient world, with no equals. Their massive stone arch bridges were so amazingly strong and well-built that many of them still stand and are actively used for their intended purpose to this day, after 2 millennia of operation. Some Roman bridges have withstood what modern structures built next to them have not. The main secret of the incredible strength of their bridges lay in the ingenious use of the semicircular arch as the main load-bearing element of the structure. This well-thought-out design perfectly and mathematically distributed the enormous load from its own weight, transferring the weight of the entire bridge and the heavy traffic passing over it to powerful stone supports, or bulls, standing in the riverbed. The massive supports were often deliberately built in a characteristic sharp wedge shape, directed against the current, so that they could effectively cut through the powerful flow of the river and withstand the pressure of water and ice. This shape also protected the supports from the destructive effects of spring floods and floating trees. In the complex construction of supports directly in the bed of a turbulent river, Roman engineers used advanced engineering solutions that were impressive for their time. Around the site of the future support, they built a sturdy double wooden barrier of piles driven into the riverbed. The space between the outer and inner walls was tightly filled with waterproof clay to seal it. And then the water was laboriously pumped out from the inside with special pumps, creating a dry working space right at the bottom of the river for masonry work. This temporary dam technology, called a caisson, allowed construction to take place underwater as if on land. Sometimes when the mountain was too large and high to cut through economically, the persistent Romans built tunnels right through the mountain range. These were the most complex engineering structures of antiquity, requiring extremely accurate geodetic calculations and incredible perseverance on the part of the builders, who worked for years. The tunnels were cut simultaneously from both sides of the mountain, and they had to meet in the center with minimal error, which required outstanding mathematical knowledge and skills. In the swampy, dense forests of northern Europe, where the soil was particularly unstable, they used a special adapted technology of gentle roads for weak soils. Heavy rows of thick logs were laid lengthwise and crosswise on the unstable, unreliable soil, creating a stable wooden deck that distributed the load. On top of this sturdy decking, the usual traditional layers of large stones and fine gravel were laid, creating the final road surface. The wooden base prevented the road from sinking into the soft soil under its own weight. It was this amazing ability to creatively adapt their standard, proven technologies to absolutely any natural conditions and climate that fundamentally distinguished Roman engineers from builders of other civilizations. They had an extensive arsenal of proven effective solutions for any possible problem or obstacle. They fundamentally did not see insurmountable obstacles in their path. They saw only a series of engineering tasks of varying complexity that had to be methodically solved in a rational manner. For the Romans, the word impossible did not exist in construction. There were only different levels of complexity and resource costs. The road was finally built after months or years of labor by thousands of people. But how exactly did it function in the daily life of a vast empire? In the next exciting chapter, you will learn in detail how life and infrastructure were carefully organized along these stone rivers of civilization, and what specific amenities awaited the weary traveler on the Roman road. The Roman road was not just a utilitarian stone surface for traveling from one point to another. It was a complex, carefully thought-out infrastructure system that effectively met the diverse needs of travelers, army legions, and state mail over vast distances. Along all the main roads of the empire, there was a well-designed, standardized service infrastructure created and maintained by the state. The Romans understood that a road without a support system was useless for the effective management of the empire and rapid movement. The most noticeable and characteristic element of this infrastructure, visible from afar, were the numerous milestones, or miliarium in Latin, placed along the entire route. These were impressive cylindrical stone pillars about 1.5 meters high and about 0.5 meter in diameter, firmly dug into the ground. Their surfaces were carefully carved with the exact distance to the nearest large city or administrative center, as well as the name of the ruling emperor during whose reign the road was originally built or majorly repaired. These inscriptions also often included information about the officials responsible for the construction of a particular section of the road, immortalizing their contribution. These heavy stones were placed every Roman mile, which was approximately 1,180 meters by modern measurements, or 1,000 double steps of a legionnaire. They were the first systematic road navigation and orientation system in human history. Any traveler or courier always knew exactly where they were on the route and how much distance they still had to cover to reach their destination. This system made travel predictable and allowed for accurate planning of arrival times, which was critical for military operations and government affairs. Every 15-20 Roman miles along the main highways, small post stations called mutationes, meaning places of change, were strategically located. Here, imperial postal couriers could quickly replace tired, exhausted horses with fresh, rested steeds from the reserve. This ingenious solution allowed couriers to maintain high speeds throughout the long journey without wasting time resting the animals. The horse-changing system made it possible to deliver urgent messages at speeds of up to 80 kilometers per day, which was an incredible achievement for the ancient world. Larger and more comfortable stations, known as mansiones or inns, were located every 25-30 miles along the road, which corresponded exactly to the average daily journey of a traveler or troop. These were full-fledged, well-equipped inns, with many amenities, where imperial officials could safely spend the night, eat a hearty hot meal, and rest properly after a long day of travel. They necessarily had spacious warehouses with supplies of provisions and fodder, spacious stables for horses and pack animals, and even small public baths for hygiene. Some large mansions could accommodate up to 100 travelers at a time. Only holders of a special state travel document called a diploma, issued on behalf of the emperor, had the official right to use these state stations completely free of charge. Ordinary travelers, merchants, and pilgrims without such documents were forced to stay in private taverns and inns, which, like mushrooms after rain, naturally sprang up along all the busy trade routes, taking advantage of the demand. These private establishments varied greatly in quality of service and price, from luxurious to highly dubious dens, but they provided the necessary lodging for all comers. Special military patrols of legionnaires or auxiliary troops constantly monitored strict order and safety on all roads. They regularly ensured the safety of travel, actively protecting defenseless travelers from robbers and bandits who preyed on them. This was especially critical on remote and sparsely populated sections of roads, passing through deserted forests or mountains, where criminals felt at ease. The presence of patrols significantly reduced crime and made travel relatively safe by ancient standards. Regular repairs and high-quality maintenance of the road network were also strictly centralized under state control. Special road curators, appointed by the emperor or the Senate, were personally responsible for the good condition of the section of the road entrusted to them and reported on the work done. This perfect system was one of the main pillars and fundamental foundations on which the powerful Roman state stood firmly throughout the centuries of its existence and prosperity. Although Roman roads were originally built primarily for strategic military purposes and the rapid deployment of legions, their indirect economic impact on the development of the empire was truly enormous and transformative. They naturally became the vital arteries of civilization, along which a variety of goods flowed continuously from all provinces, powerfully stimulating trade and sustainable economic growth throughout the vast territory of the empire, from the Atlantic to the Middle East. What began as military infrastructure became the foundation of a thriving economy, connecting millions of people in a unified trading system of unprecedented scale. Before the advent of a high-quality road network, transporting heavy goods over rough terrain was extremely slow, extremely expensive, and very dangerous due to bandits and poor road conditions. Merchants tried to transport most of their bulky cargo by sea on ships or on navigable rivers on barges, which was cheaper and faster. Rome's developed road network revolutionarily opened up the vast interior territories of the continent, previously cut off from markets to active trade. Regions that had previously been economically isolated suddenly gained access to a huge market of hundreds of millions of consumers. Simple farmers from the most remote provinces now had a real opportunity to sell their agricultural products at a profit in large cities hundreds of kilometers from home. High-quality grain from fertile Gaul, fragrant olive oil from sunny Spain, exquisite wine from the vineyards of Italy. All these goods could now be delivered relatively quickly, safely, and cost-effectively to end consumers anywhere in the empire. Transportation costs fell sharply, making trade widespread and accessible even to less wealthy merchants, not just large trading houses. High-quality roads naturally contributed to the deep economic specialization of various regions of the empire based on the principle of comparative advantage. Some provinces focused on efficient agriculture and food production, while others focused on the extraction of precious metals and ores or the craft production of ceramics and textiles. This division of labor significantly increased the overall productivity and efficiency of the entire economy of the empire as a single organism. Regions produced what they did best, exchanging the results of their labor through trade. Along all the busy roads, completely new cities and trading settlements sprang up rapidly, while old settlements flourished and grew before our eyes. They quickly became important trading and craft centers, successfully serving the diverse needs of numerous travelers and local residents at the same time. The road literally brought economic life, prosperity, and civilization to previously wild and poor regions. The distance from the road directly determined the wealth and development of the region. The closer to the highway, the richer the city. The movement of goods along the roads became so massive and intense that specialized private transport companies dealing exclusively with transportation naturally appeared. They owned large fleets of specialized carts and hardy mules, numbering hundreds of animals, and professionally offered services for the rapid transportation of goods between cities for a fee. It was a real organized logistics business of antiquity with schedules, warehouses, and agents, anticipating modern transport companies by 2,000 years. Some companies had branches in dozens of cities throughout the empire. The developed road network also greatly simplified and accelerated the collection of taxes and duties for the state treasury. Imperial officials and tax collectors could now quickly reach the most remote corners of the provinces to conduct censuses and collect payments. This ensured a stable and predictable replenishment of the empire's treasury with tax revenues, which was critical for maintaining the army. Tax evasion became much more difficult when an inspector could reach any village in a matter of days. Roman roads greatly contributed not only to the economic exchange of goods, but also to the vital cultural exchange of ideas between peoples. Along with goods and legions, revolutionary ideas, advanced technologies, religious beliefs, and philosophical teachings from different parts of the world constantly traveled along these stone paths. Latin as a lingua franca and the characteristic Roman way of life with its values actively spread throughout the diverse empire, creating a common culture. Roads were not only routes for carts, but also for the spread of civilization and cultural unification of the conquered peoples. High-quality roads were the strong framework and skeleton that held together the entire vast edifice of Roman civilization with its institutions, trade, and culture. When the roads fell into disrepair after the fall of Rome, the unified economy of Europe collapsed with them, leading to fragmentation and economic collapse for centuries to come. Building and maintaining such a gigantic road network required enormous resources. It was one of the most ambitious and expensive infrastructure projects in human history. The price of eternity was very high. The main resource was human labor. Hundreds of thousands of legionnaires, auxiliary troops, and hired workers were involved in the process. Through their efforts, the wilderness was transformed into an orderly space. The organization of labor was at the highest level. The workers were divided into brigades, each of which performed its specific task. Some cut down trees, others dug trenches, and still others quarried and laid stone. The working day was long and exhausting. The work was mainly manual, requiring enormous physical strength and endurance. Discipline was strictly enforced, as in the army. The financial costs were also enormous. Money was spent on purchasing tools, paying workers' wages, and organizing supplies. Construction was financed from the state treasury, as well as from taxes collected from the provinces. Sometimes the local population was also involved in the construction. This was a form of compulsory labor. Thus, the conquered peoples themselves built the roads that ensured Roman control over them. Despite the enormous costs, the Romans considered these investments to be absolutely justified. The economic and military benefits of having high-quality roads far exceeded the cost of their construction. This system worked flawlessly as long as the empire was strong and rich. However, over time, it became increasingly difficult to maintain such a vast network. Economic crisis and constant wars depleted the treasury. When central power weakened, the roads began to fall into disrepair. Without constant repair and maintenance, they gradually deteriorated. Ironically, the very roads that contributed to the empire's prosperity made it easier for barbarian tribes to invade its borders during its decline. The history of Roman roads is a story about how even the most perfect system requires constant effort to maintain. Greatness is easy to build, but much more difficult to preserve. Why were Roman roads so durable? The answer lies in three key factors: high-quality materials, ingenious design, and, most importantly, a well-thought-out drainage system. The Romans built for centuries, not skimping on the foundation. A deep trench and a multi-layered structure protected the road from groundwater and frost. This was the main difference from later roads, which were often built directly on the ground. The use of durable stone and unique concrete based on volcanic ash ensured incredible wear resistance. The roadbed was designed to withstand the weight of heavy carts and armies numbering in the thousands. But the main secret was the fight against water. The convex profile of the road and the side drainage ditches effectively drained rainwater. Water is the main destroyer of any road surface, and the Romans understood this perfectly well. The legacy of Roman roads is vast and multifaceted. Many modern European motorways and highways follow the exact routes of their ancient predecessors. The foundation laid by the legionaries proved to be so high quality that it is still in use today. The very idea of creating a unified, standardized, and state-supported road network is a Roman invention. This concept formed the basis of modern transportation systems around the world. The expression, "all roads lead to Rome," did not come out of nowhere. In the center of Rome, in the Forum, stood the Golden Milestone, a gilded column from which all distances in the empire were measured. It was the symbolic and geographical center of the world. Roman roads outlived the Roman Empire itself. They continued to serve people in the Middle Ages, connecting cities and kingdoms. They became the skeleton on which modern Europe grew. Today, looking at the preserved sections of these ancient roads, we can touch history with our own hands. These stones remember the footsteps of legionnaires, the creaking of merchant carts, and the pounding of the hooves of imperial couriers. They are silent testimony to the power, order, and engineering genius of a civilization that dared to challenge time itself. And as we can see, it did not lose this battle. We see that a Roman road is much more than just a path. It is a complex engineering structure, a tool for governing a vast empire, an engine of the economy, and a symbol of civilization. It was created thanks to the iron discipline of the legions, the genius of engineers, and an understanding of the fundamental laws of construction. The secret of their durability is not magic, but a systematic approach, deep foundations, a multi-layered structure, high-quality materials, and, most importantly, effective drainage. The Romans built not for years, but for centuries, and their calculations proved to be correct. Today, when we complain about potholes in asphalt that is only a few years old, it is worth remembering these stone roads. They remind us that true craftsmanship and thoughtful design can defeat time. What other secrets of ancient civilizations would you like to uncover? Perhaps you are interested in the secrets of the construction of the Egyptian pyramids or the technology of the lost cities of the Maya? Suggest topics for future videos in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new journeys into the past.